Cool. Welcome, everybody, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight. My name is Sean McBrearty. I'm the Legislative and Policy Director for Clean Water Action, and we're here tonight with a special On Tap Meet the Lawmakers series that we're doing to introduce our members to some of the great environmental champions who were recently elected to the Michigan State House. I'm glad to be joined tonight with by both Representative Abraham Aiyash, who was elected to a partial term that he's now serving, as well as his first term coming up starting in 2021, and Representative-elect Julie Rogers, and also my co-host tonight, Tim Minotas of the Sierra Club. And Tim, do you want to talk over the format for this evening a little bit?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tim Minotas. I am with the Sierra Club here in Michigan. And for tonight's On Tap Town Hall series, the format will be, first, we're going to introduce and talk with Rep. Abraham Aiyash first. We're going to ask a series of questions of him, and then we're going to go into around 7:30 or around half-hour mark. We're going to then switch over to introduce Rep-elect Julie Rogers, and we'll go over a series of questions with her as well. So the first half tonight is going to be questions directed towards Rep. Aiyash, and then the second half will be directing questions to Rep-elect Julie Rogers for tonight. So just want to say thank you all for joining us tonight, and looking forward to the conversations.
Yeah, and for those of you who are joining us either on Facebook Live or on Zoom, if you have any questions, we'll see if we, hopefully we'll have time to address any questions you do have. And if you do, please put them in the Q&A box if you're watching on Zoom. It's easier for us to monitor that way. And in Facebook, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. We have people monitoring there as well. So to start off with, Representative Aiyash, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you decide to run for office and represent the 4th District.
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys for setting up this call, and thanks for having Julie and I. You know, my situation is a little unique. I too was elected in November, but I started officially today. Because my friend and political mentor, Isaac Robinson, passed away from suspected COVID-19. So he was one of the first people that I ever met in politics. First thing he tells me when I see him is, I'm your Jewish, Irish, Catholic brother from the hood. And we quickly formed a political friendship. And Isaac showed me the ins and outs of Detroit politics. And we actually worked closely on a lot of issues, namely around US ecology and other environmental justice issues in House District 4. And I ran to continue the fight for economic, social, and environmental justice, especially at a time when we recognize the value and importance of government, of having good government that centers the working poor and our planet. And I look forward to the conversation today.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that introduction, and we'll go right into questions. So the first question tonight is around environmental issues in general. So there are so many, as we're all aware, so many environmental issues going on today here in Michigan. What do you think you are the most excited to work on? And what do you think are the environmental issues that most impact your district?
Obviously polluter pay is a huge issue. Holding corporate polluters accountable. I think where we can make some headway on and hold people accountable in places like Detroit are polluter sites. We are approaching the 1-year anniversary of the green ooze issue over off 696. And I think that sort of highlights the need to hold folks who have held toxic chemicals or pollutants that have now leaked into our water, onto our roads, in our soil, that we're holding them accountable, and we're making sure that we are guaranteeing that those sites are not going to further harm and cause health detriments to people in places like Hamtramck and Detroit. And obviously water, right? This pandemic has shown us more than anything that water is so fundamental to human life. As we tell people to wash their hands, so many folks have their water shut off. And if they do have access to water, it is not clean water. So protecting our Great Lakes, ensuring that people have access to a living standard of clean, affordable drinking water, I think is going to be critical. And making sure that we're taking care of our natural resources. The reality is, Michigan, for example, a lot of folks don't know this, we're the second most agriculturally diverse state in the country. And that's a result of so much beautiful land and natural resources that we have. We got to make sure that we're good stewards of it. So not only do we have really good water, but we have pretty much every single fruit and vegetable you can think of, probably save for avocados and almonds. And I think that's a testament to how lucky we are as a state and how we need to make sure that we're taking care of and protecting all of the fruits and blessings that we have here in the great state of Michigan.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you bring up polluter pay, and there are so many issues going on, as Tim mentioned. One of the main issues, I think of going around in Michigan right now, with a very obvious example being the 48217 zip code in Detroit. And that community and other communities that are surrounded by polluting facilities, so many sources of air and water pollution concentrated in one place. The fact that EGLE, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, considers these pollution permits on an individual basis, has been incredibly ineffective at protecting public health or the environment in these communities. So now, now that you've been elected, are there any changes you think that could be made, either laws that we need to change or changes to the permitting process that might change that and help to protect these communities from the cumulative impacts of pollution that they're facing?
So I think that permitting simply can't be looked at in a silo, right? I think that oftentimes when we, what is now EGLE, looks at permitting, it's under the lens of not clear impact. Sorry, forgive me. We're not looking at things from a overall impact, right? Every permit is siloed, and I think that's extremely problematic because, to your point, John, we're seeing maximum output of so many pollutants in a certain area, and then what you're creating are these hot zones for just absolute, health detriments. Places like 48217, to your point, have so many pollutants in the air emitted, partly because the permitting process didn't look at the overall picture of a certain area. So I think one of the things we can do is look at zip codes and census tracts and say, what is the overall level of pollution in that area? And does it make sense to further allow permitting that will, make that even worse? And I think that's a common sense approach that we can take, so we're not creating super sites of pollution like places like 48217.
Great. Thanks, Abe. Going along the lines of, all these issues, they're all interconnected. And, right now, climate change is the greatest environmental challenge of this century. And, from the Sierra Club's point of view, it is the Sierra Club's #1 priority. Science demands that, we take bold action to reduce pollution for the health of the planet, the public, and the economy. We need Michigan to continue to transition to 100% clean energy future, and do so in ways that advance economic, racial, and gender justice and create family-sustaining jobs. So we must consistently choose clean energy over the dirty fuels of the past, no doubt. What is your understanding of the seriousness of climate change? And what do you believe the Michigan Legislature should do to combat this issue?
We are not running out of time when it comes to climate, right? We have ran out of time. And the further we slow down and take inaction on this issue, the bigger the crisis will be for people like my children who aren't even here yet, right? So I think that we absolutely have to reimagine what it means to push a bold agenda to address the climate disasters. You know, we're seeing things like blue-green algae, we're seeing things like PFAS, some of which are man-made and some of which are a result of just changing climate that require action. You look at our water, that's a clear example of that. One, we have to move away from the old and antiquated ways of harvesting energy. And I think we can invest and invest wisely and see some significant gains in things like wind and solar in a place like Michigan. I commend the governor for decommissioning Line 5. I think that was a huge first step, long overdue, that a pipeline that was first started before we had the polio vaccine was still seeking permits to run in the Straits of Mackinac. So one, we got to start shifting away from that and incentivizing green energy in the state of Michigan, right? The other part is we have to really reimagine and rebuild our permitting process for so many of these corporations that are continuing to pollute and continuing to enable and perpetuate the climate disasters that are looming, if not already here in the state of Michigan. And, you know, I always tell folks, we were kind of excited that we're getting a good stint of weather this weekend, you know, where we're supposed to have some decent weather this late in November. I say, you should be scared out of your mind that the weather is this nice on the third weekend in November. That is actually terrifying. And it speaks to the need to finally take action so that our winters aren't more harsh. And I think a clearest example of that, if you look at earlier in 2019, right? We had some of the harshest winters ever, and we were literally being told we were overusing sort of our power grids. So we were asking folks to turn down the thermostat so that everyone has access, so we're not going to blow out our systems. What does that tell you? It tells you that, one, there is a need for investing in more energy resources, right? So why not take an advantage of investing in it, investing in some of that new energy in our state, and be the pioneers, right? I don't want to have to hear that California is the state that is leading the efforts, or Arizona on alternative energy. I think there's so much potential here. We have the culture of manufacturing in this state. We have the people and the grit that can make that happen. So why not start investing in that? And again, focusing our efforts on protecting our resources. There are so many, we have such an abundance of amazing nature in the state of Michigan that we are not taking care of properly. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. And, you know, to follow up on that a little bit, we did have one quick question from somebody on Facebook of what do you consider to be clean energy?
You know, I don't believe in this narrative that there's clean fossil fuels. Anything that isn't a fossil fuel, right? First and foremost, right? Thinking about wind, solar, geothermal energy, like these are the resources and these are the power sources that we need to start investing in. This narrative that we have clean propane or natural gas is better than, obviously some things are, I don't look at some of these things as better. I just see them as a little less worse, right? Coal is very bad, right? Shifting over, it's a little less worse. I don't believe in it being better. I think we have to start changing that narrative so that we are focusing our efforts on, eliminating fracking in this state so that we're protecting our land and our water, ensuring that we're looking at ways of pushing, and the technology is there, right? We heard the narratives in the early 2010s, right? Oh, we're not there yet. The technology has made so many advancements that we can start investing and really pushing and showing folks, hey, you can power a home on solar power, so that we don't need to cap, for example, right, on a serious policy point, not capping how many watts of power that a consumer can generate off solar energy, right? These are some of the conversations that we need to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for elaborating on that. And, it does raise sort of another climate related question. I mean, we've known about the climate crisis for, oil companies have known for 50 years. We've known as the general public for over 30 at this point, without much action. And in Michigan, you're right, you hit the nail on the head. We have the not only the technology to be able to have a different future, we also have a skilled and talented workforce and the manufacturing infrastructure already in place. So, I mean, in your opinion, what do you think has stopped previous Michigan legislatures from getting the job done on climate?
The influence of big oil and big energy. I mean, I'm going to be very direct here. I think the amount of influence that a lot of these corporations have to keep things as they are because it benefits them is there. And until we are willing to call that out, and until we're willing to hold folks accountable who enable that system, we are going to be in trouble. There is no reason why corporations like Marathon, like DTE, are having so much influence in what policies we are writing. And that is certainly one of the biggest gaps. And I think this denial of science is going to be a second one. Folks are not taking the science seriously. And we know the vast majority of Michiganders, the vast majority of Americans believe that we have to take some sort of action, and not private action, right? People believe that the government should lead on a lot of these initiatives. I don't care what anyone tells you. The data shows that people are okay with this, whether you're on the right or the left. Folks recognize the imperative to work with the sense of brevity on this issue, and they recognize the need for government to push that. So I think really calling out and beginning to unmask a lot of the corporate influence that is slowing this process down because they want to keep profiting off the system as it is. And also this denial of science has been so problematic within the state legislature. I think it's been exacerbated by COVID-19. I mean, you're seeing people that just do not believe this pandemic is as serious as it is, and they're choosing to ignore the hard science, which is why, unfortunately, multiple representatives and legislators have gotten COVID-19.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's terrible to hear about that, and we wish that we hope that everybody who's had this horrible disease recovers, and that our fellow Michiganders and folks around the country start wearing masks and taking social distancing seriously, and complying with all the local public health rules. A last subject that we wanted to cover with you tonight sort of flows into the climate and energy subjects, and that's the public trust doctrine, which actually Governor Whitmer used in revoking Enbridge's easement recently on Line 5. For those listening in, the public trust doctrine, simply put, is a fundamental principle of law that guarantees public ownership of our water and bottomlands. And then that water and bottomlands are entrusted to the state to protect the waters and bottomlands in perpetuity. Public trust is currently reinforced through case law in Michigan, but this has proven to be both expensive and ineffective at protecting Michiganders from water takers who want to extract publicly owned groundwater for private profit. Groups like Nestle and their permit to get 400 gallons a minute from the White Springs well. So as climate change continues to put pressure on fresh water supplies around the world, we want to make sure that here in Michigan, we have the strongest possible legal protections against the extraction of our water for export. So what do you think the Michigan legislature can and should do to increase protections around our public trust water resources?
First of all, I think the concept of water being a public source of ownership is brilliant, right? And I think we need to start treating it as such. In the same way that roads are something that we invest in and we continue to, well, unfortunately, haven't invested as much as we needed to, but roads are seen in a similar light, that it is something that should be something that we all contribute into, and that the idea is we have folks that will take care of it and make sure that we are upkeeping it. Our fresh waterways have to be the same way. And I think I always tell people, use the roads as an analogy. Should certain companies be able to control certain roads and determine how well or how poor they should be in terms of upkeep? The answer is absolutely not, right? Because when I'm driving down I-96 or I-75 or M10 rather, I'm not deciding which lane is going to be mine. So it's the idea with water, it should be the same thing, right? It does not make sense that corporations like Nestle, in essence, can get a permit and pump unlimited amounts of water for pennies on the dollar when they are selling back the water that we all have ownership over. It's a public trust, to your point, right? It's kind of like public land. They're selling it back to us so that they can make money, right? And again, that system of profiteering further perpetuates the viciousness to want to keep making more money and want to increase profit margins. And that's not a good thing for our Great Lakes, right? And that's not a good thing for our groundwater. So making sure, to your point, I think that I kudos to our governor for pushing this idea and initiative forward, and you guys for fighting for it as well. And I will be a champion, not just someone who supports this idea, but I will absolutely be a champion on changing some of our laws and reimagining sort of how we are perceiving public water and how we are engaging the citizenry to make sure that they are taking ownership and accountability for that water and not letting a free-for-all for corporations who are able to buy into the bureaucracy and figure out ways to continue to extort some of that water. Because it is extortion. I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thanks very much. It was a great way of putting it. And we're so glad, congratulations on your recent election. We're so glad to have, a champion for these issues that are critical, to folks all across the state get elected to the legislature. So congratulations on your win again. And thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. And Julie, I know you're about to get introduced, but good to see you. And the west side of the state has a good advocate as well.
They sure do. We've gotten lucky in a few cases in this election. Well, it's not luck, it's hard work from organizations and organizers and regular folks all across the state who came out and voted. And before we do introduce Representative-elect Rogers, we had a special request for the folks attending tonight. If you're listening in either on Facebook or on Zoom, we're going to put a link up in the chat here to an action for something that we'd like for folks to do tonight if you can. Which is, so there's a bill right now, as y'all know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Whitmer put out several executive orders meant to protect people across our state. And some of those got overturned by the Michigan Supreme Court by overturning a part of the law that she was using to base her authority on for those orders. One of the things that got overturned was her order ending water shutoffs and mandating that people who do have their drinking water shut off have it turned back on by their utilities in the pandemic. So we're going to be putting a link up in the chat. It just came up in the chat here, and you can take action on Senate Bill 241, which is a bill that Senator Chang introduced. And they've taken Senate Bill 241 and added sort of a change to it so that it just does what Governor Whitmer's executive order did to make sure that we're not cutting people's water off and that people are going to have their water service restored if it is cut off throughout the pandemic. As we all know, washing your hands is a first line of defense against COVID-19. And water is a human right. People deserve water regardless of whether or not they are able to pay for it all the time, not just sometimes, but especially during a pandemic. It's entirely irresponsible for our legislature to not act right now. And so with this link, you can email your senator and representative, and that will also get copied to Senator Mike Shirkey, the Senate Majority Leader, and the Speaker of the House, Representative Lee Chatfield. Thanks very much, everybody, for going in and taking that action. Please do that. And then also please follow that throughout lame duck session. This is our #1 priority, is making sure Senate Bill 241 gets passed and people have access to the water that they need to stay safe. So thank you all for doing that. And Tim, would you like to introduce Representative-elect Rogers?
Absolutely. Now I would like to introduce Rep-elect Julie Rogers, who is the newly elected representative from the House District 60, which encompasses Kalamazoo. It's formerly held by now term limited Representative John Holdley. We're very much looking forward to have a champion in Rep-elect Rogers, and really looking forward to working, with her on these priority issues within the state legislature. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Rep-elect Rogers. And the first question I'll ask of you, Rep-elect Rogers, is kind of the same question as we asked Rep Aiyash. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for office.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Sean and Tim, for having us. I think these spotlights are awesome for people to get to know us that aren't from our area. Of course, I'm from Kalamazoo County, born and raised here. And really what got me started in government and politics in this very challenging world we live in is I'm a physical therapist. And so people often say that's a really strange background or a really weird way to get into legislation, but it's very similar. I'm very passionate about helping people. And so helping my clients, my physical therapy patients, one at a time. I actually have had a number of them have major issues, particularly with affordability and access to healthcare. And so I just got tired of so many of them having to choose between putting food on the table and their prescription medications. And I decided to run for the legislature. I actually started my journey, and I just want to say a shout out, especially to Sierra Club. You've been with me a very long time and helped me for many, many years. And finally, the third time was the charm. But I did run in 2006 and 2008 in the 61st. 61st is a very hard nut to crack. And so I'm thrilled that my friend Christine Morse finally won over there. But after I got 49% twice, they drew me out, gerrymandered me out and into the 60th. Good news, bad news. It's a very Democratic district, but it was a big, difficult primary. I also had the advantage. I didn't feel like it was an advantage losing in 2008, but I did have the privilege of serving 8 years on the County Board of Commissioners. And I feel like that experience has really served me well and prepared me. I've served both in the majority and the minority. And my first term, I had to very quickly learn how to get along with the other party to advance anything and get things done. So I'm really excited about getting to work with Representative Aiyash and a lot of the other fantastic legislators. Healthcare is why I got into this, and I think environmental issues and health and safety are very closely linked. I also served on the county's Brownfield Authority for 10 years and really got to see up close and personal the years of devastation and the pollution. And I'm frankly kind of tired of being reactive and looking forward to trying to be more proactive instead of going backward and always having to clean up and spending millions of dollars on these expensive, costly ravages to our lands.
Thank you. And especially with that experience on the Brownfield Authority, I'm sure you probably have some good stories to share with us. I was going to ask, out of the environmental issues we're facing now in Michigan, what are you the most excited to work on? And also, what do you think are the environmental issues that most impact people back in your district?
Sure. Well, like I said, I'll just start with brownfields. So, for those of you, I think most people on the Zoom know that brownfields are basically blighted lands. Oftentimes, an abandoned gas station or dry cleaner are the two most common, but, we had a GM stamping plant. I know a lot of counties in Michigan have had old industrial plants like that. And so there's just been a lot of innovation and creativity around that. And we've turned a negative into a very big positive, but it does create a lot of costs and it's very reactive. And so I'd like to strengthen the laws, holding polluters accountable on the front end and maybe prevent some of that pollution from happening in the first place. The other thing I'm actually very concerned about is lead. And sometimes people are surprised to hear me talk about that being from Kalamazoo. But when the Flint water crisis story broke, there was a lot of scrutiny on lead, and there was an article in Bridge magazine at the time, And Kalamazoo County's children were right at the top. I think we were in the top 5 counties of numbers of our children testing positive for lead. And so I went to our county health officer at the time and said, let's look more into this and drill down as to the why. So we convened a work group around it, and we discovered it wasn't our water that was the issue. It was the lead-based paint in our old housing stock. So really, I'm interested in partnering with some of the other legislators. I know Rep. Neely from the Flint area. I know Rep. Rachel Hood have introduced some of the legislation that frankly, unfortunately, hasn't gone anywhere. So I'm looking at trying to partner. And I think some of these issues should be nonpartisan. And I think there's some work. I have some fellow county commissioners that are Republicans that I think we can work with, that are new, that are ready to kind of roll up their sleeves and get to work and really look at helping families and not make these things so partisan, but working for the health and safety of all Michiganders.
Great, thank you so much. And I think, what you very much just talked about kind of really relates into the next question that I'm about to go into. And, during this election cycle, being surrounded by so much water, I mean, water is one of the top issues, if not the top issue here in Michigan now amongst voters on both sides of the aisle, quite frankly. And, there's kind of just a mandate amongst us citizens for our elected officials to really protect and clean up our water resources here in Michigan. So, and part of that, as you kind of were talking about in your previous question, is, right now here in Michigan, we have over 24,000 contaminated sites across the state, and that number is only growing. And meanwhile, our contaminated site cleanup program doesn't have the funding it needs to keep up. And the corporations responsible, for contaminating these sites and creating these messes are rarely held accountable here in this state. As a lawmaker, what would you support in the legislature to address this problem?
Sure, thanks for that important question. So, I think a big piece of it is appropriations. Our budget reflects our priorities. And so I think we really need to support Eagle. I think they're sometimes hamstrung by their lack of funding and lack of ability to follow through on oversight. So we can pass all the legislation in the world, but if we don't fund the oversight and watchdog groups, that's going to continue to be problematic. So I think looking back at really drilling down to the budget and appropriations, and that's going to be tough because we face a major fiscal crisis with COVID. And so with my Representative Upton, I've been very frank over this past year. And during the, in the early part of COVID, back in March, April, May, I was on many calls with him, and I was very frank. And I said, if Congress can have a package to bail out Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and some of these major corporations, then they can afford to help local municipalities and local state governments. And I continue to have many conversations with members of Congress and Senate. We're lucky to have Senator Peters reelected, and along with Senator Stabenow, I think they're very sympathetic and working very hard for a financial package to help our state and local governments. But we really need Congress to step up and do their part as well. So funding is one of the major issues. I also touched on, really holding polluters accountable on the front end, doing more preventative work, I think is really important. And just really prioritizing water, because like you said before, I completely agree with the fact that water is a human right, and it's actually inextricably linked to the health and safety of our people. And if you don't have access to clean water and a way of washing your hands, we are going to be out of luck, and COVID is going to continue to run rampant no matter what we do. If we can have all the masks in the world, but if we don't have water to wash our hands, we're in trouble.
Definitely agreed. Thanks for elaborating on that a little bit. And your next question is about water shutoffs, as we've talked a little bit about tonight already. And water shutoffs for non-payment have been a major problem and specifically in low-income communities and communities of color in Michigan. It's, I think definitely an example of environmental racism in a lot of these cases, that it's our majority Black and brown cities where we're seeing this problem more than in other places. So we know that access to safe, clean drinking water is a human right. What do you think can be done in the legislature to address the problem of water shutoffs, both during and after the ongoing pandemic?
Sure. Well, I'm glad you framed that question both during and after, because this is not a new issue. We've had it highlighted, unfortunately, with COVID, but we've been talking about this in Michigan for a number of years. And I want to start by saying I applaud Governor Whitmer and her strong executive leadership with the executive orders. She, put forward that initial executive order prohibiting the water shutoffs, which I'm sure saved many lives in our state. So thank you to her, kudos to her. It's unfortunate that those were later rescinded. And so I do think the legislature needs to act. Unfortunately, our top leaders I'm hearing on their way to Washington, D.C. to play politics with our president in the White House instead of being here on the ground working to put forward some actual plans. I have yet to see a plan on how to deal with COVID. And so, there's been, the House Democrats have had a couple of really good bills around water shutoffs. I know Representative Neely introduced HB 4065, which would create a water ombudsman that would provide protections and a place in an office for people to go that have issues. So I would be very supportive of moving something like that forward. And then, trying to really improve access and affordability. There's been another bill introduced by Rep. Hammoud, and it's to create a really an avenue or a pathway for setting rates and making sure that the rates are affordable and just. You talked about environmental justice and environmental racism, and I think really setting some fair rates across the board. It shouldn't be, just like we dealt with some of the auto insurance issues, you shouldn't have discriminatory or predatory fees because of your zip code.
Yeah, absolutely. And they, you mentioned that, I like that you put it that way, the predatory fees because of your zip code. And there's, it's been shown, in fact, the city of Philadelphia has banned, just one example, there are others across the country, but they've banned water shutoffs for non-payment. And they've actually found that allowing people to pay what they can is saving the water utility money versus having to pay crews to go out and shut people off and turn people back on and then start the process over again.
Absolutely. And I would just also add that many of our county health departments are supportive of this because, again, you can have a public health crisis and countless waterborne illnesses come out if you don't have potable, safe drinking water. And so I always say, do you want to pay for it on the front end or do you want to pay for it on the back end? And to me, I'd rather, it's usually cheaper. This is how I sometimes approach my Republican colleagues, by a financial interest. It's usually cheaper to do the preventative right thing on the front end.
Absolutely. And again, moving into the issue of climate change, all these other issues are, interconnected into the issue of climate change. If we don't tackle climate change, we are only exacerbating these issues even more. So the International Panel on Climate Change has warned the world that we need to be drastically cutting carbon emissions and transitioning to renewable energy resources by 2030 in order to avoid the worst possible impacts of the climate crisis. Cutting emissions and transitioning to renewables quickly, presents a great opportunity to create thousands of jobs here in Michigan and across the country, while protecting our environment at the same time. What sort of steps should the legislature be considering and taking to address the climate crisis in a real way here in Michigan?
Sure. Well, I'm going to take a step back and just say I'm pleased with how the presidential election turned out, because I know that President-elect Biden has energy and conservation at the top of his to-do list. He's already said one of the first things he's going to really work towards is rejoining the Paris Accords and those agreements. You know, we really took some major steps backwards over the last 4 years. And I think under President Obama's leadership, we had made some significant strides. So I look forward to the next presidency leading from the top. I also think that while I applaud the governor's shutting down of Line 5, we really urgently need an energy plan. It's very easy to say we're going to stop this practice, but we need to get serious about a comprehensive energy plan. And I think that's again, another thing that all of us legislators, all 110 of us can agree on, is that we need to stop talking about it and debating on it, but figure out a compromise solution to move the football down the playing field and advance us and move forward. And is it going to be 100% what we all want? No, but I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to start with as much green energy as I can get, but I'm going to be willing to compromise, because just like in physical therapy, when I tell my physical therapy patients, some exercise is better than none at all. If you have 10 minutes in your day, do something, get off your butt and move. Some kind of movement forward is better. And I think that's sometimes been past legislatures' downfalls, is sometimes they get very stuck in the details and say my way or the highway, and then we get nowhere. So I'm really excited to try to really work together in a comprehensive bipartisan way to advance something forward so that we can have more green jobs, improve our economy that way, reduce, as much of the dirty, coal type things as possible, and really advance a green energy portfolio. And like I said, I think how we do that is financial talk. So one of the things I'm really excited about is really showcasing. A lot of people do not realize how far we have come, and I use solar as the example all the time. So 8 years ago, when I first got into county government, I was really trying to promote solar for our county government. And our administration was pretty against it. And at the time, their excuse was the return on investment was just, the numbers just didn't work out. And that might have been the case 8 to 10 years ago, but it's really been a game changer with the costs coming down. Also, we did an innovative thing at Kalamazoo County government this last year. We did a lease option to buy solar panels. And so there's a lot of new innovation that just frankly, many people are not aware of. And so I look forward to sharing some of those common sense solutions with particularly my Republican colleagues to get some movement forward.
I really I appreciate that mindset on green energy. Because I mean, as it is now, the legislature, despite having their differences about all sorts of things, including wearing masks. I hope you're both safe when you join in January. They're close, actually, to coming to a deal to at least lift the cap on, on distributed energy for solar. And I mean, if that could happen, I think some of the things that you mentioned, Representative-elect Rogers, especially as far as community programs and community solar, and possibly beginning to move in that direction of community ownership of energy resources, become a lot more possible with or without more legislative action.
Absolutely.
And do you see that as a possibility, especially when we're talking about bringing in private companies, bringing in additional jobs to the state? Do you see that as a good place to sort of look for compromise here?
I do. And I think sometimes if you can start at some of the low hanging fruit, if you will, and get some wins under your belt, then you can kind of branch out. I think it's also about building trust. I think sometimes, when you, like I said, I am excited because I've served on the Michigan Association of Counties Board of Directors with some of the incoming reps. So you can kind of look to some of those wins and say, hey, remember when we did this together? And if we can get some of that, and also I appreciate everyone on this call, because the participation from residents is so critical. And I can't do this, none of us on this call can do this alone. And I certainly can't strong arm my colleagues, but the power of those emails is real. And, as a county commissioner, when I started getting, I usually say the threshold is, and it's honestly not that high. When I get more than about 8 emails on the same exact subject, especially when they're unique and not just form ones, it's powerful and it makes us wake up and pay attention. So I just want to give a shout out to your advocacy matters and we really appreciate it. And so sometimes I get that question from residents like, do my emails really get read? Do people really pay attention? The answer is absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And we appreciate all of your work. And congratulations again on your election to the State House. We really look forward to really look forward to working with you in the years to come and our members getting to know you more. I'll just do one last call for our members. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. Folks are trusting Tim and I a little bit more than usual tonight, I think. Yeah, thank you very much to Representative-elect Rogers, Representative Aiyash for joining us tonight. Just to let folks know, our next session coming up for our On Tap series with new elected officials is going to be on Thursday evening, December 3rd at 7 p.m. with Representatives-elect Christine Morse and Ranjiv Puri. So we're really looking forward to that event as well. And I see with no other questions coming in, I think we'll just end it there for tonight. So thanks again to everybody for attending. And if you have any questions or anything in the future, please do check us out online, cleanwateraction.org/MI. And Tim, what's the Sierra Club state website?
Yep, it is www.sierraclub.org/Michigan. And that is our website for the Michigan chapter. So please check us out there.
Cool. And thanks again, everybody, for joining. Everybody have a good night.